The story opens on a cold, rainy night as 72-year-old Eleanor Whitmore sits silently inside her old car with only a worn suitcase and a framed photograph of her late husband Arthur beside her, reflecting on the 42 years they once spent building a loving home together before everything collapsed in a single evening. Inside the house, her son Daniel pressures her to leave so he can sell the property and pay off his mounting debts, while his wife Vanessa coldly reminds Eleanor that she is no longer welcome there. Vanessa's sharp words cut deeper than the rain outside, mocking Eleanor's age and calling her a burden that the family can no longer carry. Daniel avoids looking directly at his mother, too weak to defend her, yet selfish enough to let it happen. Eleanor remains calm and dignified, despite the heartbreak, quietly packing her belongings without arguing or begging. As thunder echoes through the neighborhood, she drives away with nowhere to go, eventually parking near an abandoned street where she spends the night alone inside the freezing car. The silence around her is heavy, interrupted only by her quiet breathing and the sound of rain hitting the windshield while she holds Arthur's photograph close to her chest, realizing that the family she sacrificed her entire life for has abandoned her when she needed them most. With nowhere else to go, Eleanor eventually remembers the old Rosewood Grand Theater, a forgotten building her late husband Arthur once loved deeply many years ago. Hidden near the edge of the town's historic district, the theater stands in complete silence beneath flickering streetlights, its faded sign barely visible through layers of dust and rain. The moment Eleanor pushes open the heavy front doors, the smell of old wood, mold, and decades of abandonment fills the air. Torn velvet seats stretch endlessly through the darkness, while loose curtains sway gently from the cold wind slipping through broken windows high above the stage. Somewhere deep inside the building, rusty pipes groan softly, like distant whispers from another lifetime. Eleanor slowly walks through the empty aisles holding her suitcase tightly, overwhelmed by memories she cannot fully explain. Near the backstage hallway, she encounters George Holloway, the elderly night guard who has quietly watched over the theater for years despite its closure. George is cautious at first, but after noticing Eleanor's exhausted expression and trembling hands, he allows her to stay temporarily inside an old dressing room behind the stage. Though he speaks very little, George hints that the theater has secrets most people in town have forgotten. During her first nights there, Eleanor struggles with loneliness and grief while sleeping beneath the sound of rattling windows and distant thunder outside. One evening, while searching through dusty backstage storage rooms, she discovers an old piano covered beneath a faded white cloth. She slowly wipes years of dust away with her sleeve before gently pressing a single key, filling the massive empty theater with a soft, trembling note. For the first time in years, Eleanor begins to play again, her fragile music echoing through the dark auditorium while tears quietly form in her eyes. The emotional moment deeply changes the atmosphere of the building itself, making the abandoned theater feel alive once more. Over the following days, Eleanor begins cleaning the Rosewood Grand piece by piece, carefully restoring broken chairs, sweeping shattered glass from the floors, polishing brass railings, and reopening sections of the theater hidden beneath dust and decay. As sunlight starts shining through the cracked ceiling each morning, the building slowly transforms alongside Eleanor herself. While cleaning backstage, she discovers strange old objects left behind decades earlier, including faded performance posters, handwritten notes, rusted keys without labels, and photographs of actors standing on the same stage nearly 50 years ago. George notices several of these discoveries with visible concern, but refuses to fully explain their meaning. Every few days, unsettling details begin appearing around the theater that slowly build mystery and tension. Eleanor hears strange knocking sounds beneath the wooden stage late at night, notices cold drafts coming from sealed walls, and once discovers fresh scratches near a locked basement door nobody has opened in decades. One evening, while cleaning beneath the stage curtains, she briefly hears what sounds like metal shifting underneath the floorboards before the sound suddenly stops. These moments quietly deepen the mystery, while local residents slowly begin noticing lights glowing inside the abandoned theater again after many years. Curious townspeople gather outside the building, whispering rumors about the elderly widow now living there alone. Some admire Eleanor's determination, while others believe she is wasting her final years inside a dying building. Yet despite the exhaustion and uncertainty, Eleanor continues rebuilding the theater one section at a time, unknowingly moving closer toward the secret hidden beneath the stage that will change her life forever. As Eleanor continues restoring the Rosewood Grand Theater, the strange sounds beneath the stage become impossible to ignore. Late one stormy evening, while organizing old props near the backstage curtains, she hears a heavy metallic noise echo beneath the wooden floorboards directly under the center of the stage. The sound is different this time, deeper, almost deliberate. Driven by growing curiosity, Eleanor kneels down and notices faint scratches surrounding several old boards hidden beneath decades of dust and paint. With trembling hands and a rusted crowbar borrowed from George, she slowly pries the boards loose and discovers a narrow iron hatch concealed beneath the stage floor. The metal door is sealed shut with age, its surface covered in rust and faded markings that appear untouched for decades. George immediately becomes uneasy when he sees it, admitting that rumors about hidden rooms beneath the theater have existed since he first worked there as a young man, though nobody had ever managed to open them. Determined to uncover the truth, Eleanor spends the next several days searching for clues hidden throughout the theater. Among old backstage storage boxes, she discovers a ring of antique keys wrapped inside a faded cloth beside a stack of forgotten performance records. One of the keys finally unlocks the iron hatch with a loud metallic crack that echoes through the empty theater like a secret waking from the past. Beneath the stage lies a narrow underground corridor coated in dust, leading toward a hidden room untouched for generations. Flashlight shaking in her hand, Eleanor slowly steps inside and discovers shelves filled with sealed documents, yellowed photographs, financial ledgers, and an old steel safe hidden against the far wall. The room feels frozen in time, preserved like a forgotten memory buried beneath the theater itself. Inside the safe, Eleanor finds stacks of property records and legal agreements connected to Arthur Whitmore. Shocked and confused, she takes several files to Clara, a quiet librarian and local historian known for helping preserve old town archives. Clara becomes increasingly stunned as she studies the paperwork, eventually uncovering the truth Arthur had hidden for decades. Long before his death, Arthur secretly purchased not only the theater itself, but also the enormous undeveloped land stretching behind the entire property. At the time, the land was considered worthless because the surrounding district had collapsed economically. But now, after years of urban redevelopment plans quietly moving through the city council, the same land has become one of the most valuable commercial zones in the entire county, worth several $1 million to developers eager to rebuild the area. Eleanor can barely process what she is hearing. The abandoned theater everyone mocked was never worthless at all. It had been Arthur's final act of protection for her all along. As Eleanor continues searching through the underground room, she discovers a small wooden box hidden beneath stacks of papers. Inside rests a handwritten letter addressed directly to her in Arthur's familiar handwriting. Fighting tears, Eleanor slowly unfolds the letter while sitting alone on the dusty stage under a single hanging light bulb. Arthur explains that he always feared the family's greed would one day destroy everything they built together, so he secretly protected the property to ensure Eleanor would always have somewhere safe to return if the world ever abandoned her. The final line completely breaks her emotionally, as she quietly reads aloud through tears. "If the world ever turns against you, this place will bring you home again." At that moment, the empty theater no longer feels abandoned. For the first time since losing Arthur, Eleanor feels his presence surrounding her within the walls of the Rosewood Grand. Meanwhile, rumors about the theater's hidden value slowly begin spreading across town after Clara privately contacts a property specialist to confirm the land records. Within days, strangers begin driving past the theater, photographing the building and asking questions about ownership. George realizes the secret can no longer remain hidden, while Eleanor quietly understands that the family who abandoned her will soon return once they discover what the old theater is truly worth. News about the hidden value of the Rosewood Grand Theater spreads through town faster than Eleanor ever expected. Within days, expensive cars begin appearing outside the old building, while investors quietly contact city officials about the surrounding property. One afternoon, a black luxury sedan stops in front of the theater, and a sharply dressed businessman introduces himself as Mr. Bennett, a respected real estate developer known for restoring historic properties across the state. Unlike the greedy investors flooding the area, Bennett speaks to Eleanor with surprising respect and genuine admiration for the theater's history. As he walks slowly through the restored lobby and dusty auditorium, he explains that the land behind the Rosewood Grand has become extremely valuable due to a massive redevelopment project scheduled to transform the district into a cultural and commercial center. He offers Eleanor millions for the property, but also admits that preserving the theater itself would mean far more to the community than destroying it for another luxury development. Eleanor listens carefully, yet refuses to make any immediate decision, sensing that Arthur's intentions for the theater were far deeper than money alone. Unfortunately, the arrival of Mr. Bennett confirms the rumors Daniel and Vanessa have already started hearing across town. The moment they realize the abandoned theater is worth millions, their behavior changes completely. After weeks of silence, Daniel suddenly begins calling Eleanor repeatedly, pretending to worry about her safety and health. Vanessa follows with forced kindness, claiming the family made mistakes and only wanted what was best for everyone. Eleanor immediately recognizes the emptiness behind their sudden concern, yet she remains calm and polite, refusing to argue. Days later, Daniel and Vanessa arrive at the theater in expensive clothes, accompanied by a lawyer carrying stacks of legal documents. Their fake sympathy quickly collapses into greed once they begin demanding access to Arthur's estate records. Vanessa coldly insists the property should remain within the family, while Daniel pressures Eleanor to sell everything immediately so they can all move forward together. Their manipulation becomes even more shameless when they accuse Eleanor of hiding assets from her own family. George watches silently from backstage, disgusted by their behavior, while several curious townspeople gather nearby after hearing raised voices inside the theater. The confrontation escalates dramatically in the center of the old auditorium beneath the dim stage lights where Eleanor once stood alone and broken only weeks earlier. But now, something about her has changed. She no longer looks frightened or uncertain. Holding Arthur's documents carefully in her hands, Eleanor speaks with quiet dignity and calm strength that completely unsettles Daniel. For the first time in years, she directly confronts her son about the night he abandoned her during the storm. She reminds him that family is not measured by property or money, but by loyalty during moments of suffering. Daniel grows defensive and angry, accusing Eleanor of turning against her own family because of wealth. Vanessa interrupts repeatedly, attempting to pressure Eleanor emotionally, while their lawyer insists the inheritance should legally involve Daniel as Arthur's only son. The tension inside the theater reaches its peak when Eleanor's attorney, arranged earlier through Clara's recommendation, finally arrives carrying the complete legal records Arthur secretly prepared years before his death. In front of everyone gathered inside the theater, the lawyer calmly confirms that Arthur transferred full ownership of the Rosewood Grand Theater, the surrounding land, and every connected financial asset solely to Eleanor long before he died. The documents are airtight and legally irreversible. Daniel's face immediately shifts from confidence to shock. Vanessa falls silent as the reality of the situation crushes their expectations completely. The crowd watching nearby begins whispering while Daniel loses control emotionally, shouting that Eleanor manipulated Arthur against his own family. Yet Eleanor never raises her voice. Instead, she quietly explains that Arthur simply understood the difference between love and greed long before anyone else did. The humiliation Daniel experiences at that moment mirrors exactly what Eleanor endured the night she was abandoned. Except now, the power has completely shifted. Mr. Bennett, who witnessed the confrontation from the back of the theater, later approaches Eleanor privately and tells her that restoring the Rosewood Grand may become one of the most important decisions the town has seen in decades. As Daniel and Vanessa leave the theater furious and defeated, Eleanor stands alone beneath the glowing stage lights once more, realizing that the place where her family tried to discard her has now become the very source of her strength, dignity, and freedom. In the weeks following the confrontation with Daniel and Vanessa, Eleanor makes the decision that surprises the entire town. Despite receiving multiple offers worth millions of dollars from investors eager to purchase the Rosewood Grand Theater and the surrounding land, she refuses to sell any part of it. Instead, Eleanor announces that she plans to fully restore the theater and reopen it for the community Arthur once loved so deeply. Many people initially believe the project is impossible for a woman her age, but Eleanor remains quietly determined. With support from George, Clara, and eventually even Mr. Bennett, restoration work slowly begins across the old building. The transformation unfolds gradually through a series of emotional moments that breathe life back into the forgotten theater. Broken seats are repaired one row at a time, while old chandeliers are carefully cleaned until they shine once again beneath the ceiling. Workers repaint faded walls, musicians begin visiting the stage, and for the first time in decades, music fills the Rosewood Grand every evening instead of silence. Eleanor personally restores the old piano she once discovered beneath layers of dust, spending long hours teaching local children how to play while sunlight pours through the theater windows each morning. The abandoned building that once mirrored Eleanor's loneliness slowly becomes the heart of the town again. Families gather inside the lobby, local artists volunteer to help rebuild the stage, and older residents begin sharing forgotten memories connected to performances they attended there many years earlier. Newspapers eventually publish stories about the elderly widow who transformed an abandoned theater into a symbol of hope for the entire community. Meanwhile, Daniel's life rapidly collapses under the weight of his own greed. The business investments he desperately tried to save fail completely, leaving him buried in debt with lawsuits closing in from every direction. Vanessa, no longer willing to remain beside him without money or status, files for divorce and leaves shortly afterward. Their once carefully polished life falls apart publicly, forcing Daniel to confront the consequences of the choices he made against his own mother. Yet, even after everything that happened, Eleanor never seeks revenge. She simply moves forward with quiet dignity, while Daniel slowly realizes he destroyed his relationship with the one person who truly loved him unconditionally. The emotional turning point arrives when Mia visits the theater alone late one evening, shortly before the grand reopening. Unlike her parents, she arrives without excuses or demands. Standing nervously near the stage Eleanor rebuilt with her own hands, Mia finally breaks down in tears and apologizes sincerely for abandoning her grandmother during the hardest moment of her life. Eleanor embraces her gently, understanding that unlike Daniel and Vanessa, Mia still has the ability to learn from the past and choose kindness over greed. Their reconciliation brings warmth and emotional healing to the story's final moments, preventing the ending from becoming purely bitter or vengeful. At last, the night of the grand reopening arrives. The restored Rosewood Grand Theater glows brightly against the dark evening sky as crowds gather outside beneath newly lit marquees for the first performance held there in decades. Eleanor stands quietly backstage, wearing a simple, elegant dress while listening to the sounds of laughter, music, and conversation filling the building once again. George watches proudly from the wings, while Clara and Mr. Bennett welcome guests entering the theater. As the curtains slowly rise and the audience applauds, Eleanor steps onto the stage where her life once seemed completely broken. The lights shine warmly across her face as she looks out over the restored theater that saved her when she had nowhere else left to go. In the final moments of the story, Eleanor's voice softly narrates over scenes of the glowing theater and smiling audience members. They thought her story had ended, but life was simply waiting to give her a second act. The camera slowly pulls away from the illuminated Rosewood Grand, standing proudly in the center of town once more. No longer abandoned or forgotten, just like Eleanor herself. After the grand reopening of the Rosewood Grand Theater, the town slowly begins changing around Eleanor in ways nobody expected. What once stood as a dying, forgotten building at the edge of town gradually becomes a place where people gather not only for performances, but for comfort, memories, and second chances. Local newspapers publish stories about the elderly widow who rebuilt an abandoned theater after losing everything, and visitors from neighboring towns begin traveling to Rosewood just to see the restored landmark for themselves. Small businesses nearby reopen one after another as the district slowly comes back to life, creating opportunities that had disappeared years earlier. Eleanor becomes quietly respected throughout the community, though she never seeks attention or recognition for what she accomplished. Every morning before sunrise, she walks alone through the silent auditorium, checking the lights, straightening programs left on seats, and gently touching the polished piano that once sat forgotten beneath layers of dust. The theater no longer feels like a place haunted by loss. Instead, it feels alive with purpose. George continues working beside her almost every day, though neither of them speaks much about the difficult months when Eleanor first arrived broken and alone. They no longer need to. Their friendship was built during nights of silence, exhaustion, and quiet rebuilding that words could never fully explain. One afternoon, Mr. Bennett returns with another business proposal, offering Eleanor the chance to expand the theater into a larger cultural center funded by investors from the city. The financial opportunity is enormous, but Eleanor hesitates after realizing the theater risks losing its soul if it becomes too commercialized. Rather than turning the Rosewood Grand into another luxury attraction for wealthy outsiders, Eleanor chooses a smaller path focused on preserving the theater for ordinary people in the town who once believed they had lost it forever. Her decision surprises Bennett deeply, yet it earns his respect even more because he finally understands that Eleanor values meaning over money. Meanwhile, Daniel struggles to rebuild his life after losing nearly everything. Though ashamed of his actions, he remains unable to fully forgive himself for abandoning his mother when she needed him most. One cold evening, he quietly enters the theater alone after a public performance has ended. The auditorium is nearly empty, except for Eleanor sitting near the stage organizing sheet music beneath the dim lights. Daniel hesitates for several moments before finally apologizing sincerely, without excuses, for the first time since the night he forced her out of the house. Eleanor listens quietly, while the silence between them feels heavier than any argument they ever had. Though the pain of betrayal has not disappeared, Eleanor finally tells him something Arthur once believed deeply. People destroy things when they forget what truly matters. Daniel breaks down emotionally, realizing too late that his greed cost him years he can never recover. Yet Eleanor does not reject him completely. Instead, she offers him the possibility of rebuilding trust slowly over time, not because he deserves forgiveness easily, but because bitterness no longer controls her life. In the months that follow, Mia becomes increasingly involved in the theater, helping organize performances, teaching younger children, and spending long afternoons beside Eleanor learning piano pieces Arthur once loved listening to. Their bond grows stronger with each passing season, creating a sense of healing that quietly repairs part of the family Daniel nearly destroyed forever. During the final scenes, the Rosewood Grand hosts its largest event yet, a holiday concert attended by hundreds of people from across the region. Snow falls softly outside, while warm golden light shines through the theater windows into the dark streets beyond. Backstage, Eleanor pauses alone for a brief moment before stepping toward the curtains. She looks around at the restored walls, the glowing lights, and the crowded auditorium filled with life once again. For the first time since Arthur's death, she no longer feels abandoned by the world. As the orchestra begins playing and the audience applauds loudly, Eleanor smiles softly, while Arthur's final words echo once more in her memory. If the world ever turns against you, this place will bring you home again. Life. They begin spending quiet evenings together after the theater closes, drinking tea backstage while listening to the faint echo of rehearsals lingering through the old walls. Sometimes they speak for hours about the past, about Arthur, about George's late wife Margaret, about all the dreams life once forced them to abandon. Other nights, they simply sit in comfortable silence, watching the stage lights dim one by one. Neither of them ever expected companionship to return at this stage of life, yet somehow the theater has given both of them something neither thought possible anymore, a reason to keep looking forward instead of backward. Meanwhile, news of the Rosewood Grand's remarkable revival spreads far beyond the small town itself. Journalists begin arriving from nearby cities to write stories about the elderly widow who rebuilt a forgotten theater after being betrayed by her own family. Eleanor dislikes attention and avoids interviews whenever possible, but the community insists her story deserves to be heard. One article in particular unexpectedly goes viral online after a young reporter publishes photographs comparing the abandoned building from years earlier to the vibrant cultural center it has become. Thousands of people across the country respond emotionally to Eleanor's journey, many describing how her resilience inspired them to rebuild broken parts of their own lives. Letters begin arriving at the theater almost daily from strangers, thanking her for reminding them that purpose does not disappear with age. Not everyone reacts positively to the growing attention. In another city, several hours away, Daniel accidentally sees Eleanor's story appear during a televised news segment playing inside a restaurant bar. For a long moment, he simply stares silently at the screen, while footage shows Eleanor smiling warmly beside children performing on stage during a community recital. The success and admiration surrounding his grandmother feel unbearable compared to the emptiness his own life has become. Since losing his business investments and finalizing his divorce months earlier, Daniel has drifted through a bitter cycle of regret, isolation, and financial decline. Most former friends disappeared once his money and influence vanished. Even Mia, still carrying deep guilt for her role in abandoning Eleanor, rarely speaks to him anymore beyond short, uncomfortable phone calls. That night, Daniel drives alone for hours without fully realizing where he is going until the familiar streets of Rosewood appear ahead through the darkness. The restored theater glows brilliantly at the center of town, alive with music and laughter spilling through the open entrance doors. Daniel remains frozen across the street, watching families enter the building. His grandmother once nearly lost forever because of him. For the first time, the full weight of his betrayal finally crashes into him without excuses left to hide behind. He remembers every ignored phone call, every cruel argument, every selfish decision he justified while convincing himself success mattered more than family. Standing alone beneath the cold streetlights, Daniel realizes that the life he destroyed was never Eleanor's, it was his own. Inside the theater, Eleanor finishes helping clean up after another successful performance when George quietly informs her that someone is outside asking to see her. The moment Eleanor steps into the lobby and sees Daniel standing nervously near the entrance, an uneasy silence fills the space between them. He looks older now, exhausted and diminished in ways expensive suits and confidence once hid so easily. For several seconds, neither of them speaks. Then Daniel finally lowers his eyes and says the words Eleanor once believed she would never hear from him. "I'm sorry, Grandma." The apology is not dramatic or polished. His voice trembles under the weight of genuine shame. Daniel admits he spent years chasing wealth and status, while taking for granted the one person who loved him unconditionally. He confesses that watching her rebuild the theater forced him to confront the kind of man he had become. Tears begin forming in his eyes as he quietly tells her he does not expect forgiveness and understands if she never wants to see him again. Eleanor listens silently without interruption. The pain he caused her cannot simply disappear with a few sentences, and both of them know it. Yet as she studies the broken man standing before her, she no longer feels anger controlling her heart. Life has already taught her how bitterness can slowly poison whatever remains after loss. After a long pause, Eleanor gently tells Daniel that forgiveness does not erase the past, but refusing to forgive only allows the pain to continue living forever. Daniel breaks down completely, unable to hide his emotions any longer. Eleanor slowly steps forward and embraces him for the first time in years. The moment feels fragile and imperfect, filled with grief for everything they lost, yet also with quiet hope that some wounds may still heal, given enough honesty and time. Watching from a distance near the stage entrance, George quietly turns away to give them privacy, understanding better than anyone how rare second chances truly are. Weeks later, Mia also returns to Rosewood, carrying her own guilt and regret. Unlike Daniel, she arrives without excuses or expectations, offering only a sincere apology and asking whether she might volunteer at the theater if Eleanor would allow it. Eleanor welcomes her carefully, but kindly. Over time, Mia begins helping organize children's programs and community events, slowly rebuilding trust through actions rather than promises. For the first time in years, fragments of the family Eleanor thought she had permanently lost begin cautiously finding their way back together. On the anniversary of the theater's grand reopening, the town organizes a special celebration honoring Eleanor and the Rosewood Grand's extraordinary transformation. Hundreds of people fill the restored auditorium that evening, beneath glowing chandeliers and warm golden light. Former students perform music on stage, local actors reenact scenes from the theater's earliest productions, and photographs documenting the restoration project appear across a massive screen behind the curtains. Eleanor sits quietly in the front row, overwhelmed by the life now surrounding her life that once seemed impossible during the darkest period she survived alone. Near the end of the ceremony, George slowly walks onto the stage holding an old envelope worn carefully by time. He reveals that Arthur wrote a final letter shortly before his death, asking George to deliver it to Eleanor only when he believed she had truly found happiness again. The audience falls silent as Eleanor unfolds the trembling paper with tears already filling her eyes. Arthur's words are simple, yet deeply personal. He writes that he always feared Eleanor would spend her later years feeling forgotten despite giving so much love to everyone around her. He reminds her that kindness often survives far longer than wealth or success, even when the world temporarily fails to notice it. The final line causes Eleanor to quietly break into tears while the audience listens in complete silence. The stage lights may dim for a while, my love, but your story was never meant to end after the first act. As emotion sweeps through the theater, Eleanor slowly looks around the glowing auditorium filled with people whose lives have become connected through hope, compassion, and resilience. For the first time in many years, she no longer sees herself as someone abandoned by life. Instead, she finally understands that this unexpected chapter was never an ending at all, only the beginning of a beautiful second act.
Thank you for watching my video. Don't forget to subscribe my channel.